Hi, George, and it's Tuesday afternoon, and we have a good friend of mine, a colleague in the same county as I live in Virginia,
Okay.
and it's a pleasure to host her today.
Yeah, welcome. It's Tuesday. Today we have Dr. Dina Gottesman. I hope I said that right.
You did?
And the topic that we're going to be discussing is insights from the stethoscope to social media in the independent pediatric practice. Pretty cool.
Very good.
So, Dr. Dina completed her pediatrics residency at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital at Case Western Reserve University Hospital in Cleveland.
Yep.
She attended medical school at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and she's one of the leading partners at South Riding Pediatrics, which we have interviewed Dr. John before, who is the son of the original Dr. Farrell that started the first practice in Reston. Welcome, Dr. Dina or Dina, and it's a joy to see you again. How have you been?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
We always ask everybody, why did you become a pediatrician?
So I always say I am not one of those people that figured it out when I was 6 years old. What do you want to be when you grow up? I came to it gradually. I knew from a pretty young age that I was more of a science math person than like an art, music, English history person. And I had no idea as to what I wanted to do with that. And in high school, I took AP Bio, and my teacher, Mrs. Adler, was saying, "Hey, you really like biology?" I'm like, "I really do. I think I want to be a researcher or something. I don't know." She's like, "You've ever thought about going to medical school and being a doctor?" And I really hadn't. I hadn't thought about it at all. And so she was the first person who put that in my head. And the other thing for me as an animal lover, I was actually tossed up between medical school and veterinary school for a really long time. I didn't know which. I knew I wanted to care for creatures. I wasn't sure whether to go the human way or the animal way. And in undergrad, all of the pre-med stuff and all of the pre-vet stuff are exactly the same. So at some point, you have to figure out which terrifying test you want to take and which set of schools you want to apply to. But all like the chemistry and physics and math, all of that is exactly the same. And so I ended up deciding to be a person doctor, mostly because there was a show called Emergency Vets back in the day. I don't know if you guys ever saw that on Animal Planet. It basically made me cry way too much, where I'm like, I'm never going to make it through veterinary school. We can't do this. So I applied to medical school and went to medical school. And even in medical school, initially, I had no idea as to what kind of doctor I wanted to be. I was like, I guess I'll get into clinicals and I'll figure it out. And it became very clear to me once we started clinical rotations that I really liked pediatrics. I very much preferred kid patients to adult patients. And then, so I went to pediatrics residency. And then, even at the beginning of pediatrics residency, what kind of pediatrician do you want to be? I don't know. Do I want to be a generalist? Do I want to be a specialist? What do I want to do? I went through all of the rotations that we go through in pediatrics residency. And really, for me, I'm a sort of a general pediatrician because one, I really found what I liked doing was continuity of care. So getting to see kids over time, even during residency. Some of the babies that I started with in our little resident clinic were 3 when I left, and it was hard to say goodbye to them. And that there was no subspecialty that I liked so much, that I was so passionate about, that I really only wanted to learn more about that. So for me, it was really just a natural keeping an open mind process of elimination in terms of what felt like it worked for me.
Wow. And for people that don't live in Northern Virginia, DC, or Maryland, crossing the river, the Potomac River, from the Maryland side to the Virginia side, is considered treason and going to another country. Both ways. People from Virginia will not cross over. And people from Maryland will not cross over. It's not those hillbillies down there in Virginia. They drive pickup trucks and have shotguns. But Dr. Dina grew up in Maryland. Where in Maryland did you grow up across the river?
Right across the river, Montgomery County, Maryland. So my mom still lives I always say without traffic, about 35 minutes from where I live in Reston, and with traffic, 3 hours. But so I'm still pretty close to friends and family that I grew up with that are still in that area, which is nice, which is part of why I moved back to this area.
So Bethesda, Potomac, or Rockville, or
it's used to be called Gaithersburg. Now it's called Northern Potomac. So it's right in between Potomac and Rockville, actually.
Yes. Yeah. I'm an immigrant. So when we first came to America, my dad bought a house in Potomac.
Mhm.
And so my dad's house still there, 2 blocks from Churchill High School by
I
Cabin
was about to
John.
ask what high school did you go to? Was it Churchill?
I went to Bullis. My mom was shocked that they allowed you off campus to
Oh,
go down to Cabin John Shopping Center to the sub to get a sub. And they had a smoking hut. And she
oh
thought that
my.
was just ridiculously dangerous for young people. So I went to a Catholic parochial school and then a private prep school to keep me out of danger.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I got into enough danger as an adult. What do you find that you still love about your work, your job every day?
First, do you love your job?
Of
I
course you
love my
gotta
Like,
love
you
it.
job. I
still
always
love
say
your
I
job.
love, yeah, I love my
Still love your
job,
job.
like we'll call it 90% of the time. I don't think anyone really loves their job 100% of the time. Maybe there's some people that do. 92% of the time, I really like going to work. We all have days and things that are less fun about work, but 90+% of the time, I love my job. And I think for me, it's really the same thing that drew me into general pediatrics from the beginning, which is I really like getting to know people over time. I like meeting new people too. I'm coming up on my 15-year anniversary with the practice next month. And I still meet new people all the time because people move, people shift around. Sometimes you just don't meet people. But the kids that I'm seeing now that are finishing up their freshman year of high school that I met in 2009, my first few weeks of the practice, like I know who all those babies were. And now they're high school kids. And so getting to know them and their parents and their siblings over time and forging those relationships, those long standing relationships over time, that's still my favorite part. I just really have fun with that.
So I think it's interesting. You're a lot younger than I am, but
A whole lot.
have you seen a difference? Because sometimes we interview really young pediatricians, not you're young, they got
Not that young.
2 3 years into practice, and their expectation is that they'll say, I want to have fun at work. And my head just spins. Like the devil comes out, things just spinning like this, and I'm gonna start throwing up. They're gonna have the priest come over and take the devil out of me. Because if a job is that much fun, no one's gonna pay you to do it. A job is a job. And so there's
Yeah.
friction and you got to put effort into it. And some days aren't going to be great.
Yeah.
That's why somebody's paying you to do it. I'm still, people, if you're listening, I still looking for takers. My fun job would be to sit on the beach with a couple of beers and have someone pay me like I'm going to work. I've been waiting for that offer for 30 years. It hasn't
Hasn't come.
materialized,
Doesn't exist.
right?
No.
That
So-
job
so
doesn't exist.
I love it that you say, I love what I'm doing. Yes, of course, we're passionate about what we're doing,
Yeah.
but at least my expectation is not it's going to be fun. Some days are going to be difficult and some days are going to be horrible. And that just happens. Are you seeing that too in the practice when you hire new doctors that they say, I just want to have fun?
I don't think I've heard anyone say that. We definitely have some younger doctors, or we've hired, I'm trying to think. We have a doc coming up on her 1-year anniversary with us. We've had a couple of docs that have been with us for 2 years. Neither of those two were straight out of residency though, so they were a little older. And our fresh out of residency person is coming up on 4 years with us. And I think it's true. I think that's a really important distinction. I love my job and having fun are not always the same thing. Like I had for example, I was on call this past weekend. We had a difficult clinical situation come up. I had to be on the phone to the health department, to the hospital, to the ICU. Like I was doing all of that. And that was a clinically serious situation. It wasn't fun exactly. But at the end of that, I knew I had done a good job getting done what needed to get done for that patient family. And I loved that part of it. Like I was sad. It was rewarding. It wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy being on hold and going back and forth between 3 different people, 2 different locations to figure out the information I needed to figure out. But that wasn't fun, but it was still part of why I love my job, if that makes sense. I think there's
Isn't that why you went to school to learn?
Yeah.
To make
To learn how to
better?
do this. Yeah.
Maybe even save a life?
So absolutely. But Dan, yeah, no, when we interview, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, I just want to have fun.
Oh,
I think people expect to work hard. I think creating a good work environment that doesn't feel toxic, that feels open and like people can ask questions, I think is really important. But yeah, fun is different. And there are definitely different kinds of fun, maybe is the best way to put it.
Sometimes it's funny that you got a 4-year-old and you go palpate his abdomen and they start giggling and laughing and you can't, the laughter is contagious and you got to tickle them when they're the armpits and and that part is fun. But my expectation is that it's work. I'm going to have to tell some people some bad news. I'm going to have to tell other people, no, I'm not writing antibiotics for your cold, or your kid gained 20 pounds from last year. That we're not okay with that. And none of that is fun. And people, as one would expect, react like you're calling my kid ugly. No, I'm not calling your kid ugly. I'm just pointing out that we can't gain 20 pounds a year because we're going to get into some real trouble. So we got to talk about it. So I was just curious whether you're seeing the younger doctors, as it seems that the work ethic is.
Yeah, that was a question. What are your thoughts on work ethic these days?
I will say, I guess I'm very lucky, and I feel like I should find some wood in this room that I'm in to knock on. I have not had any issues with work ethic with my colleagues. I really haven't. I feel like people generally step up. So I am very lucky. I think that's not 100% of the time, but I think in general, we relatively recently, within the last year, had a situation where a colleague's parent passed away unexpectedly. And you better believe everyone's lighting up like, I'll help, I'll do this shift, I'll do this call. Oh my gosh, can I help? It was like, we get to figure out who amongst all of us that wanted to help. It was a good problem to have. Yes. And I feel like in general, that has been sort of the way it's been with our practice. So I think I'm very lucky in that way. I think occasionally with staff and other folks within the practice, occasionally that's been an issue in the past. But honestly, we've got, again, I feel like I'm jinxing all of us right now. We have a really good sort of team in place across the board right now. Everyone's getting along. Everyone's working well together. There doesn't seem to be a lot of drama. This is fabulous. Let's keep it that way. But it's been really good. So I'm lucky.
Who does the hiring? Do you do the hiring or? And I know.
Yeah, so there are 5 partners. And I think it depends who we're hiring. So for doctors, for physicians, it's the partners. We interview, certainly our practice manager is often in as part of that as well, but it's the doctors for the doctors. We have a really great nurse manager who we love very much. And in terms of nurse hiring, it's typically her with the practice manager, and usually one of the partners. Typically we have one partner who takes a little bit of a managing partner lead in terms of admin kind of stuff. So she will often weigh in with that stuff as well. And then office staff, we have the office manager typically manages that. So it depends who we're hiring.
Is there a question that you like to ask when you're interviewing other fellow pediatricians? Is there some particular question or just kind of how it just flows during the interview?
I'm more of a flow person. I feel like that's why we try not to overwhelm people and have all 5 of us go to an interview lunch, because that feels like that's not going to be a good vibe for folks, but 2 or 3 of us. And I feel like there's a couple of my colleagues that tend to have set questions or questions in their minds that they want answers to. And I'm more about having a conversation, listening to the person talk, and then vibing off of whatever they're saying, I think is more my style. But that's why there's usually at least 2 of us, because we all have slightly different styles. So we end up getting some solid information along with just personality vibe checks. Because I think you want the person to be qualified. You want them to have good recommendations. You want to feel like, they know what they're doing. But you also want to feel like they're going to fit into the culture of the practice. So I think that's really important too.
Now, what are the hours in your practice?
So that has changed quite a bit over the course of pandemic life. So currently, we are 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then we see patients in our bigger South Riding office on Saturday mornings only, like 8 to 12, and no checkups on Saturdays. So it's sick visits and then newborns. The exception to that is newborns if they need to come in. And then we're closed Saturday afternoons and Sundays. When I joined the practice, part of the reason they were hiring is because we used to have evening hours where there was enough of us that we worked in shifts. So there was like every day, there was one 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. person, a couple of 8:30 to 5 people, and then one and sometimes two. It changed, the hours of it changed a little bit over time, but it was like noon to 8 or something, like a later shift to do evening appointments. And parents really loved it. It was a little stressful because you're there by yourself trying to figure out like well checks and sick visits. You were each had like a nurse triage kind of person with us too. And then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, a lot of the need for large numbers of appointments and evening appointments went down. And so we scaled back our hours there were several iterations of this, some version of 8:30 to 5. We always kept Saturday mornings. And then in the last, it's got to be at least 2 years, we started opening back up at 7. And essentially, I'm sure evening hours would be very popular with everyone except the physicians. And so we have not, it keeps coming as a conversation, but it hasn't happened yet. I think part of it is right now, we are still in our practice, at least somewhat trying to split up well kids from sick kids. You don't have coughing kids with 2-year-olds who are healthy kind of thing, all moving through the office at the same time. And so I think it gets a little tricky because you'd have to have enough nursing to have sick and well, and what would that look like? Or maybe it would only be well. So it's certainly come up as a topic of conversation to go back to evening hours, but thankfully from a business perspective, we're doing fine. And none of the doctors really want to go back to that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest challenge for independent practices right now? The pediatrics, insurance companies. I don't know that's specific to pediatrics or private practice or anything, but I think all of my headaches, or not all of my headaches, the biggest proportion of my headaches on a day-to-day basis are stemming some issue with insurance companies in terms of what medications are they going to pay for, or how much are my poor, horribly peanut allergic patient parents paying for EpiPens. Asthma medication stuff is a mess. ADHD medication stuff is a mess. A lot of the sort of key things of when you think about what we prescribe, I feel like a lot of times it's the insurance companies that we're having to fight to get what our patients actually need. It's very frustrating. It is. It is.
Yeah.
You're the face of the practice on social media. Why did you pick that job up?
Oh, did I pick that job, or was I more? I think it started off as more of a voluntold situation. If you've ever heard that term, I was voluntold. So when I became partner, which was a while ago now, 2012, 2013, something like that. I have to go back. At the time, at least, there were 4 partners. And the idea was that each of the partners had a little job within admin that they were doing. Things worked slightly differently now than they did then. Somebody was the lead person dealing with doctor schedules. Someone was the lead person helping with sort of office staff issues. Somebody worked with nurses, all of that. So at that point, we did not have any social media presence at all. So there was no Facebook page. There was a website, but the website was old and in need of a refurb. It wasn't very easy to update with new content, the website. And so I was the role, John came up with the title. He's like the communicator. So I was the one who was supposed to communicate things to the public or figure out ad stuff and stuff. So initially I was the youngest in the practice at the time. I am not now, but I was then. So I created Facebook pages for both practices. It's not that hard to register a business Facebook page. And I initially started trying to post twice a week. I had never done it before. I didn't know anything. I was trying to post a combination of like interesting articles or fun stuff with joke memes that were relevant to pediatrics. And we built an audience, but it started to get a little overwhelming, and I started to realize I was looking at other sites going, I feel like other people are doing a lot more, and I feel like I don't have the time or the knowledge base to be doing what I need to be doing with this. We also in 2016, 2017, we're having a little bit of a financial downturn, a little bit, like we're having issues. This was before we joined Trusted Doctors. So in terms of what we were getting paid and all of that. So there all of a sudden became this push like, hey, we need to attract new patients to the practice. which is when the practice as a whole decided to get with a marketing team, hire someone to help with this. So at this point, we have been working with a wonderful marketing team led by Katie Wilson, who's fabulous, since 2017. And because I was I'm her liaison. So all of the social media stuff, all of those things, a lot of it, she really helps schedule out and do. We meet every other week. I have approval and veto power. I'm contributing plenty, all of that kind of stuff. So that's how we got more into social media. And at the time, we weren't on Instagram or TikTok because that wasn't a thing in 2012, 2013, or maybe it was, but I was unaware. And so I don't know how many years ago now, a few years ago, we got more into Instagram. We were posting to both. And she was like, you need to start doing reels for the practice, Katie said to me. And I'm like, great, I'll get one of the younger docs to do it. Because by that point, there were younger docs. And no one wanted to do it at all. I think several of our younger docs at the time, at least, didn't even have social media. They'd gone like the flip way. They just didn't believe in social media. And I was like, all right. So I started doing some reels for the practice, which I have kept up with. I'm still hoping at some point that a younger, more social media savvy doc will take up that mantle, because it is not my favorite thing. But that's how I became it. I was the liaison for our marketing person, and then essentially got voluntold again by her in the most loving, supportive way possible that, yeah, you need to start doing videos. So that's how.
I enjoy your reels on Instagram, so you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
But to level set, something happened in Northern Virginia around 2014 to 2018. And I'm not sure what happened. My suspicion is that housing got too expensive and younger families couldn't move in. Because I closed the urgent care in 2014, and several practices, it wasn't just one, but several practices started either closing, or if they had two offices, like they had an office in Sterling and Reston, consolidating, just going to Reston, or they're in Reston and Lansdowne, they moved only to Lansdowne. And I think it's just that the pricing of the houses got to a level right after the debacle of 2009, where young families weren't able to afford it. And they were looking to move out further out to where they could afford it. It wasn't just one practice is having financial trouble. It was a whole bunch of well-established practices, or one practice would have a lot of booming business in the Fairfax office, but the Reston office was just dying. And it made no sense because they've been there forever and the doctors were great. So that's what happened then. So did the marketing effort pay off?
Yeah, I think a couple of things came together. I do think the marketing effort was part of it. I really think a big piece of it was we got very lucky that we all live and work in the same area, that Sandy Chung got her brainchild together to form the pediatric super group for negotiation purposes. I really think that made a huge difference. I do think the marketing has made a difference. I think it was probably a combination of those two things.
And also you were lucky because John started the first pediatric practice in South Riding. South Riding was nothing. It was just bare land, and somebody decided to start putting some homes, and John bought a house there because it was cheaper than Reston. And it'd be a shorter commute if I have an office here too. And so he started that office as a sidekick. And then now every respectable pediatric group in Northern Virginia has an office in South Riding.
Yeah.
And you even have a hospital that delivers babies, which is a very pretty hospital.
Yes.
Which has all changed over the last 15 years or so.
Yeah.
Do you think your social media appearances have helped you in the exam room? Do people come in and say, I came in because you talked about sunburns, or I listened to you talk about mosquito bites, and this isn't like you told me this would happen and it didn't happen, and so I want you to take a look? Or do you think that translates into the exam room?
No, I don't think so. I think what I get more often is patients that I know already. Usually patients I've only met once or twice won't say this, but patients that I know, patients I've been knowing them for a few years, will just tell me like, oh, I love your reels. You look so cute. It's good information. I showed them to my friends, or I forwarded it to like my aunt or whatever. So I think it's more that. I certainly haven't had anyone yet come in and be like, well, you said this on your reel, but now you're telling me that. I haven't had that. I was worried that would happen. I know it could, but I have not had that happen yet. It's been mostly generalized and complimentary. So we'll take that.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Do you
There
have
is something,
you guys,
hold on, there is something to this video stuff, because during COVID, we would do these short videos of 1 minute, 2 minutes with the different doctors on different things, and
Yeah.
people updated on what's happening in the office with COVID. And I stopped doing that because I thought it was silly. Personally, I'm a professional.
Yep.
That was an emergency and needed to be done. And I know Herb's thoughts on silliness in the videos, but we should have a little bit of a decorum. No?
Yeah.
definitely.
I think my videos, I don't know if my videos are not.
No, I'm not talking about yours. I'm talking about other people.
Oh, I guess I don't know.
People.
Most of the videos I watch, most of the people that I follow on social media that are doctors do have pretty good decorum in terms of they're explaining stuff. They're not too gimmicky or animated, or I guess that's the style that I do my videos in. So maybe that's just the other accounts that I'm drawn to for kind of inspiration or kind of what speaks to me, because it's more like how I would do it. We definitely did some additional videos for COVID that was more office-based. Hi, we're now having you call ahead before just coming in. We're doing it this way now. We have changed our hours again, those kinds of things. And those multiple of us participated in, and we shot those on our phones, and then just got Katie to edit them together for us. So we definitely did those kinds of videos. The ones I do now are, some of them are seasonal, some of them are specifically topical. Some of them are like, when do I panic over a fever? It's sometimes I just really think of things that are like, what are the 16 million questions I've been asked this week? Okay, let's just answer them. Because we all have, for a lot of things, a little bit of a spiel that we go into for like how to start solids, asthma care, all of that kind of stuff that obviously gets individualized to the patient in the room. But there are generally, we all have that kind of start off spiel on whatever it is, seasonal allergies.
And so you want to hear, before I ask you the next question, because you're going to hate what, you know what my spiel is when they say, like, when should I start solids? At 4 months. What should I start with? Ask your mother. She raised you fine. Because whatever I say is going to be wrong when you get home and you ask your mother. Why be embarrassed?
Just start with that.
But there is something to be said about these videos. I'll give credit to Herb, because it was his brainchild for us to do. We made these videos where we send a text message with a hyperlink to a video on YouTube for each particular visit type. And we talk about what's going to happen at that visit, what vaccines you're going to get, some anticipatory guidance. We did it in a PowerPoint presentation, doctorally, with pictures, not very complicated. And you have the two talking heads, myself and one of the younger doctors. And I put some scary pictures of measles and chicken pox and stuff. And you get, Dr. Scott has never seen these illnesses. I have. So it's a good idea to get your shots. People seem to like that. And they sometimes, they asked that they'll stop the screen and take a screenshot of the PowerPoint presentation. I've been told by people that people don't want to hear PowerPoint stuff. I don't know what's the right answer.
I think it depends on the person and probably the age of the parent that you're talking about too. Because I think, these days people still have babies at, 25 or 30. And there's also lots of first-time parents who are not that much younger than me. And so I think some of it may be a generational thing and what you're more comfortable with and how tech savvy you are as a person, and just basically boils down to a thing I'm sure we all say a lot, which is that different people are different. And so different things are going to speak to them, and they're going to want their information laid out differently. So
the brainchild of this, Herb, the idea was to be able to give the information that you give every single day repeatedly. Patient has it. And then when they come into the room, I always ask them, did you get that text message from us that said the doctors would like you to watch this video? 95% of the time they say yes. And they actually are watching the videos. And the idea was, do you have any questions on the video? Go off on little things. And if they say, no, you've answered, most of the time, The presentation was so perfect. You answered all my questions. I'll talk to them. Yeah, your kid's 2 years old. Make sure he doesn't fall down, jump out a window, fall into the swimming pool, and drown. It's to expedite the visit, to help the doctor to deliver the care. I'm finding uptake on it from the physician's point of view. They just can't let go. They have to do their spiel of 25 minutes, and then they wonder why they're overwhelmed, burnt out, and can't go home on time. They don't use it to their advantage. And I tell them, I assure you that video will tell more than you will ever on a video, because we sat down and we thought about it. You're doing it freestyle.
Yeah.
What I think the problem with Bright Futures is, other than that it's impossible to actually do it more than twice in a day, is that the relationship is what's important. If you're focused in a checkbox of things that you have to go through, you're no longer human. You're not asking about how mom's job, that she stayed home for 3 years and now the kids are in daycare and she's gone back to work. How's that going for you? Do you like it? Are you happy? What is it that you want to get out of these 10 minutes of what is spent together? Because I've seen plenty of kids. So ask me the questions that you want to listen to the answer while you're here. All the other stuff, I can give you a video, I can point you to a website, I can give you an instruction sheet that you can read at home after the kids are in bed. But if you want to foster the relationship, you want to meet their needs and be human with them. And these checkboxes really, or the EMRs really get right. It's like putting up a cinder block wall between me and the parents. And yeah, it's a cinder block. You're not talking to each other. You're not listening to each other. You're not building the relationship. So I think they're helpful. I find them enjoyable. I have a very interesting question, because Dr. John is a phenomenal human being, and so are you, Dr. Dina. But now that Dr. John and I are getting to our later years in practice,
yes,
and you got younger doctors, how do you maintain that healthy culture? Because the way John and I were trained and what we did in training is somewhat different than what you did, which you're in the middle, and really, really different than someone who's out 2 years out of residency.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I like about how both of our offices is none of us have individual offices. None of the docs have individual offices. It's all open plan. So there's like the way the South Riding office works is there's imagine a giant rectangle, essentially, with rooms along the outside border, and then half walls in the middle creating office space. And there's a doctor's section and a nurse's section. So all of the doctors hang out together. We're all together all the time. So I think that's really what fosters the culture, is we're all together. So we're all chatting about not only ourselves and our lives and our weekends when we're just getting there, or at lunchtime or whatever, but we're also talking about patients all together. And so I think was really, even for me as a young doctor fresh out of residency, but I think also for the younger docs that have joined the practice since, it makes it really easy and unintimidating to be like, hey, so I've got this rash. I think it's this. Can you come eyeball it with me? Because you don't have to knock on anyone's door. They're all there anyway. So I think that's a big piece, is just the layout really fosters culture. And I know when that is not the original location of South Riding Pediatrics, it used to be, I don't know, down the road a little bit. I think they had just moved into that space 6 months before when I joined the practice. So I do know that space was built out. They weren't coming into an inherited space. And I do think that John and the partners that were there at the time really thought about that, really wanted that communal doctor space to foster sort of good doctor communication, team culture. And I think that works. And the rest in office, the setup is a little bit different, but the docs all still hang out in one space. There's like a giant doctor's office that's like a super doctor office, and everyone's just there. And so I think that really helps as much as anything else. And I think we've been lucky and thoughtful, and also happen to hire really good people. So everyone wants to work and wants to do the right thing. And it's no one's fault how your residency hours were set up. None of us were in control of that. The fact that you guys worked however many ridiculous hours you worked, and we had some sort of limit, and now they can't work more than however many consecutive hours. Like, none of the doctors that are ourselves or that we hire or that we work with, none of us were in charge of any of those regulations. So you work with what you got and to foster those relationships that way, I think.
Yeah. I think it becomes an issue in that, like George and I, and probably John, if you had 102 fever, you didn't even put a mask. You took 800 milligrams of Motrin
And you went to work.
Showered, and you went to work.
Yeah.
You only didn't show up to work when they actually physically tied you down to a gurney in the hospital.
And that happened to me.
And
Went to work with 105 fever, passed out, got admitted with the measles.
and then it's probably you're probably in the middle where it was a little bit more, no, you can infect somebody, you better stay home, we'll try to figure it out. And then it seems to me like the pendulum is really swung the other way, whereas I don't know, I don't feel like I'm not feeling like I'm 100% to go to work today.
I have not run into. I think COVID changed it a little bit because of regulations and rules. At some point, if you're not feeling well, do a COVID test, and there's rules and they've changed. But I think if it has happened, I've got food poisoning or something not a couple of weeks ago. When was this? This was a few months ago. Thankfully, it was the end of the day. I got through it, and there was an assumption like Dina's not coming to work tomorrow. She can't possibly. John walked me to my car to make sure I wasn't going to pass out in the parking lot. I feel like there were several people that were uncomfortable. Can she drive? Should she drive? What is happening here? Like I was that level of not doing so great. But we had a situation the next day where one of the docs was scheduled to get a screening colonoscopy. Somebody was trying to leave a little early to watch their kid's last lacrosse game before they graduated high school. So it was like a whole thing. And I took Zofran and slept, and I showed up for enough of the day the next day to make my colleagues' lives work too. But I think if there had been a question of me being physically unsafe, I wouldn't have done that. But I think I felt okay about it. But I don't think we're running into that. I don't know that we should be going to work with 102 fevers. I think that's somewhat in the era of COVID irresponsible on some level.
That's in the John, George, and Herb era. You just showed up unless you had a limb missing or they actually tied you down.
Yeah. And when I think it's that combination of wanting to do the right thing and really not wanting to make other people ill. I think that's part of being a doctor too, is we're not trying to spread infectious illness.
So tell me, what do you do with the full panel of patients that are expecting to be seen by a physician tomorrow?
So I guess
cancel them? Do you, or
in which situation? Because at this point
I have 102 fever. I don't feel good.
I guess that doesn't. So I suppose when that happens, and it's happened occasionally, we do one of several things. Typically, we don't all work every day of the week. Most of it, I don't know what your full-time schedules look like, but ours is 4 days a week, several weekends, but we all have an admin day. The partners tend to do more admin on their admin days than the non-partner physicians, but we all have 1 day a week that we don't work. Typically, what happens is the people that are off that day get texted, hey, can you come do half a day? Blah, 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 is puking their guts out and has a fever of 103 and is going to pass out. And so we make it work that way. And so a combination of people stepping up. So this is the stepping up and hard work part, right? So we've all not felt well before. And so we all try to step up to help each other to solve that problem. So there's enough of us that we can do that. So you have some combination of shuffling a few patients around, plus usually someone who was not scheduled to work that day stepping up and working that day.
It's the stepping up part that's a problem.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but we've been lucky.
And so I have another question for you. Yeah, you have a great culture. That really helps. And I think that started with John, and then it's been followed through by the people that have been joined as partners. And that makes a huge difference. I have a question here. You really are still a Redskins fan?
No. I got to change my profile.
But you're a Commanders fan?
That is a really good point.
You're still a Commanders fan?
No. So here's
I don't care what you call them. I'm just saying, are you still a fan of that team?
And so something weird happened to me in 2020. Lots of weird things happened in 2020. Prior to 2020, grew up with the NFL. It was the one sort of sport that my whole family followed. We're not baseball people. We're not basketball people. Maybe a little ice hockey. We watch the Olympics. But like the one thing that we all followed very closely growing up was the NFL. And so that was the sport that I paid attention to for my whole life. And up until through the season of 2019, I was one of the long suffering Redskins fans. They won the Super Bowl when I was in middle school, I think. And then that was it.
That was in 91.
That was middle school. So that was it for that. They've been awful in varying degrees of awful ever since. I always used to say, whatever age my mom was at the time, you want to hear a 68-year-old woman curse to a ridiculous degree, ask her what she thinks of Dan Schneider. And you will hear my mom drop more curse words than you would think a person of that age would even know. So we didn't like the owner. It was all this. Something happened in 2020 where I think it was just with all the COVID and everything going on, my brain just subconsciously decided it didn't care about football anymore. I just lost the RAM space in my brain to care about the NFL. It was weird. Preseason had started, and I can't remember what happened 2020, if preseason, if they did it or they did it with no fans. I honestly don't remember. But John and I sat near each other for almost 15 years now. We would always talk football on Mondays. Always we would talk football. And so that follow, he was asking me questions like normal stuff. I'm like, you know what? I didn't watch the game. He was like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, I don't even know what happened. Who are they playing? And he's, what? And I don't know what happened. I just stopped paying attention to football. And so I didn't lose any of my other interests. I think one of those, the PHQ-9 depressing questions, have you lost interest in things you were previously interested? Football. I don't know what happened. My brain just dropped the NFL. And it wasn't the Redskins specifically. I think it was just, this is an extra thing my brain does not need to care about. I have stopped following it, not even made the decision to.
To me, I was a big Redskins fan. I don't know if Bill Kirby, he's a pediatric cardiologist.
I do not know that name.
And Bill had season tickets, and we used to split them up. He had 4 seats, and then somewhere, this must have been 2015, 2016, I said, Bill, I'm not going to those games anymore. It's just, nobody wants to go. It's just absolute torture. I can't stand the team. I can't stand the owner. I am done. And just to make you laugh, that was in 1991 when the Redskins won the third and a championship. I think, yes, that was still Joe Gibbs. And that was the last time they went to the Super Bowl. Yeah. And I was in Chicago as a second-year resident, so you could have been my patient in clinic.
Nice.
I'm curious, what does this have to do with our topic of discussion?
It's a lounge. We talk about all kinds of different things.
I'm never going to get these 3 minutes back. I am never going to.
Shorter than like any sport. So
who cares? Really, who cares? I don't have the bandwidth for this stuff. Move on.
Yeah, that was it. I lost my bandwidth for the NFL involuntarily.
Oh, funny.
COVID stole it.
And then what haven't I asked you that you think is important, either for aspiring young medical students that want to be pediatricians or for the pediatric community in general to know that I didn't ask you?
Let me think. I'm trying to think of something.
Would you recommend to your children to go to medical school and become a pediatrician?
I think I would, but I would make sure they really, really understood what the process of that was, and that they really wanted to do it because they wanted to do it and not because somehow they felt like they should. This is the big thing, which I see a lot of kids in our practice. They're like, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a doctor. And a lot of those kids, do you really want to do that? Or is that sort of what you think you should do kind of thing? So I think I'm a big fan of doing what your actual passion is and doing what you actually want to do. And sometimes I think we all made this decision to go into this career at 21, 22 years old. Did we actually know what we were doing when our frontal lobes weren't fully formed? No, not really. No. And I didn't really have it. No one in my immediate family is a physician. One of my uncles is, but he lives in Charlotte. So it's not like I saw him all the time and could pick his brain about it, the thing. And so I hadn't really had any firsthand experience of watching what being a physician is. You get home, you're exhausted. What is that? I didn't really know enough to know what I was getting into, which I don't know, probably was good, maybe not. I'm not sure. But I think just mostly that people should get into this if they really want to, and they should have all the information ahead of time. Yeah. And they should do it because they want to and not because they feel like it's a looks good, or it's something
You
they
know what?
are supposed to.
Having fun and passion doesn't always equate to a paycheck.
It doesn't,
A
but
doctor always
yeah,
gets a paycheck. I've seen
that's true.
a lot. I've seen 2000 technology bubble where all these business people that were making a lot of money were selling and moving because they made no money anymore. The
Yeah.
2008 real estate crash, COVID, everything. The doctor was always the same. We just
Yeah.
coasted. We have job security.
George, that's very much true. However,
Yeah.
if you don't enjoy the relationships and you don't enjoy taking care of people, they can pay you $800,000 a year to do the radiologists or orthopedic surgeons. You will be a miserable human being. It's better
Yeah.
to be not indigent, not worrying about whether I'm going to be able to eat today. I'm going to go to the food bank.
Right.
But it's better to make $60,000 a year and be happy in the
Agreed.
sense of that you feel like this is what you want to do, than make 800,000 and just curse every night when you go to bed. You're going to have to get up and go into an office and do something you don't want to do. And so I think I'm not into the having fun. Work is not fun. Work is work. And you got to dress a certain way, you got to act a certain way, you got to solve some problems, and that's work. But it should be something that at the end of the day, you go home and beyond the dollars in your pocket, you say, I feel like I made a difference today. And if you don't have that at the end of the day, you might as well find another career. And in our neighborhood in Loudoun County, it is the wealthiest county in the country. The social pressure on our kids to be super achievers and make them miserable is unbelievable. Because the pediatricians are the poorest people in Loudoun County. And you think we got MDs. Yes, great. These people have PhDs. And I'm not kidding you. I took care of a couple in the urgent care, and the dad had a PhD in computer science, and the mother had a PhD in nuclear physics. And they both worked as contractors for the US Navy on nuclear destroyers. And they made an ungodly amount of money. But it's just, and one of our fellow pediatricians at Ashford Pediatrics, phenomenal person, she is actually married to a rocket scientist.
Cool.
It used to be called Orbital. Now it got bought by a big company.
Yeah.
And that was the joke. She would come in with one of the kids, and I would just say, where's the rocket scientist? Because we can't figure this out without a smart person in the room.
But all these high-paying gigs, these jobs, whatever, they're good for a number of years as long as you're good. And then you become expired material. And then there's a new one that's coming up to replace you. And then you're just a science teacher. So you better have saved. You better have saved.
That's okay. But I don't think that if you're not passionate about physics, you could ever be a PhD to get to be a rocket scientist. I don't think it's possible, right? Yeah. So at whatever level, whatever money you're making doing
those are the exceptions.
You love what you're doing.
Just like all those guys that play guitars. The rock and roll stars. Yeah. How many rock and roll stars actually made it? And even with those guys, they're popular today. Tomorrow they're nobody.
Yeah, I don't think if you're not passionate about the job you're doing, don't go into medicine. It's a really hard field, a lot of sacrifice. Yeah. And if you're passionate about it, it's a wonderful way of making a living.
Yep.
If you're not passionate about it, try to find something that you feel some passion. At the end of the day, you feel like you've done good for humanity, and you got a paycheck out of it. It won't be good every day. Like today in clinic, it hasn't been a good day. That's just what it is. Dina, it's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you
for all you do in the community. I still remember.
Thank you very much.
I think you were there with H1N1 hit, right?
Oh, that was my first fall. That was 2009. That was my first fall as an attending.
I came over on the first Monday after we got killed in the urgent care. We saw 90 patients on Sunday in the urgent care.
Mm-hmm.
And I came over to each one of the practices with Gatorade and donuts. And John's, what are you doing here? I said, you're going to get clobbered.
Yeah.
You're going to get killed. He goes, how do you know? I said, because I got killed yesterday.
Yeah.
So you guys need Gatorade and donuts today to get you to this day, because it's going to be HELL. We'll catch up another day when we survive this. So it's great. It's great catching up with you.
You too. To that point, I still remember some crazy clinic days and me newly out of residency doing my best, kind of blah, blah, blah. And several of the older docs going, it's not always like this. I promise. This is weird for us too. This is bad. We acknowledge this is bad. This is not always how it is. And I'm okay. Let me go see the other next 20
and John got into trouble because the way his office is the first floor as you come into the main entrance of the building, and their office is to the left. And there were so many people that there were people standing in the hallway of the building and outside, and the other tenants were just ticked off. People can't wait there. They got to go into your waiting room. What are we going to do? They don't want to be seen. Oh, that was a funny story. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.